Tony, we have a new challenge in the .NET development community world. What is that challenge?
So over the last few years, Microsoft has basically been trying to consolidate all of its different .NET frameworks, approaches, tools, and so on. And, particularly what's happening is that they're moving everything away from the old .NET framework, 4.x essentially, so 4.7, 4.8, and all of its subversions. And they've basically made a point that they're not going to invest any more in that, right? So, I mean, we're still going to get security patches and releases. It's still going to be in the OS for the next few years, but, we don't know, right? I mean, at some point, support for the old .NET 4 frameworks will stop. And the problem that we've got is that as they're consolidating everything around what used to be .NET Core and is now just called .NET, there isn't an easy way to actually upgrade any existing .NET Framework 4.x applications that were built using web forms and some of the variations that they were using to build desktop applications. So Microsoft is not going to be able to provide a way for us to upgrade our .NET Framework 4.x web form applications and some of our desktop applications, because the new .NET 5, 6, 7 plus architectures are a fundamentally completely different architecture to what we were seeing in the .NET 4 framework. So it's not, that I can just run this wizard over my existing projects and applications and all of my code then magically transforms into its .NET 6 plus, 7 plus equivalents. That's not going to happen. If you were using .NET Core, and some of the MVC, the Razor pages, there is a migration path available, but anything using, the .NET Framework 4.x, pretty much you're on your own. So there's no migration, which is a problem. So one of the main drivers that Microsoft have in consolidating everything into this new .NET architecture is to make things simpler for developers and to provide a more consistent user experience across all platforms and devices. So one of the flagship projects related to this approach is the Blazor team and their use of Razor pages and user experience. So this again is fundamentally different. Okay, we didn't have this in .NET 4 framework, where we were using ASPX and we were doing postbacks and view states and all of this other stuff. Now we've got this concept of Blazor. We're going to use Razor pages, and that's how we're going to build our user experience. And then there's a really strong separation of concern between client and server functionality. So we're going to take these Blazor pages and we're going to render them on the client, and the client is going to interact with those pages. And then in the back end on the server, we'll have an open API interface that's actually interacting with our databases and so on. So again, this is very different to what we were doing in .NET 4 frameworks with ASPX pages, where everything sat on the server and a client used the browser to connect to a page and the server served the page and so on. Now it's very different. There's a separation of that user experience functionality from the underlying workflow automation and data storage functionality. And this obviously now has a major impact on the security architecture of our applications, whereas before in .NET 4 framework everything was sat on a server behind a firewall and that was all good. Now we've got this separation of functionality across the client and the backend server web APIs, and we need to make sure that as we re-architect and rebuild our applications, we're actually bearing that in mind, right? Because it does have a whole bunch of application development issues around how we actually secure the different elements of our framework solutions moving forward. And the bottom line is, when you consider all of these different impacts, the move to Blazor, the separation of client-server functionality, the massive impacts in security architecture, the bottom line is, if we've got these older .NET 4 framework applications, to modernize any of these older applications, we're really looking at a rewrite. Okay, this isn't a push a button and get an answer.
Okay, and the other challenge around this is just the timing of when we can do this. So if we don't make these changes, so if, as an organization, if you have these older web forms and desktop applications and you don't make the transition into using Blazor or .NET, the latest version of .NET, what are the downstream impacts of that?
Well, I mean, first and obvious, right? If you've got a new investment and it's a greenfield site, use .NET 6, 7, whatever, right? I mean, that's
Sure.
a no-brainer, right? I mean, for a net new project, you can just use the new technology. But if you choose not to make the change today, right? I mean, let's say, for example, you've got an older legacy .NET 4 web form application, you've spent millions of dollars over the last 10 years building it. A lot of people are going to be reluctant, as you say, just to say, throw it in the air, start again, right? But what's going to happen if you don't, right? Which I think is the essence of your question. And essentially what you're dealing with when you're looking at these older applications is a very inflexible and dated user experience. So people who are using those applications, are going to be looking at something that, is to a start going to look dated. The other thing that we found when we migrated from our .NET 4 experience into Blazor is that we were able to build much more, interactive, richer, responsive user experiences. We were able to take, advantage of a whole ton of new cloud services and other innovations in technology. So, obviously, if you don't do it, if you stick with your .NET 4, you're not going to see any of that. And the other thing, that is a key area around, if you stay with the old stuff versus move to the new stuff, one of the key innovations around Blazor is that you can use this across all platforms. You can take your Blazor user experience, you can build it into, say, a WASM client for people who are using it on the web. You can build it into a MAUI hybrid for people who want to use it on tablets or phones. And the issue is if you stay in your old 4.x environment, you're basically spending money on maintaining this old experience on this old single platform, and you're not really able to get this consistent user experience across all platforms. And I mean, that's great because it's great if you've got, like, say, a website, but do you have a mobile app? Do you have something that can run on a desktop, right? If you bite the bullet and migrate that technology into the latest .NET 6 Plus and use the Blazor technology, you can have that exact same consistent user experience across all of your platforms.
Yeah, I think the other key element to this is if you do have web forms or desktop applications that have a large backlog of enhancements that need to be done in order to support the business, or that backlog is actually growing significantly over time, then it really could make a lot more financial sense to start looking at making the investment with a new platform and making the transition now.
To learn more about Great Ideas products and solutions, visit greatideas.com. That's Great Ideas with a Z.com. Thanks.